You've heard of the creator's poorly disguised fetish. Now let me introduce you to the creator's poorly disguised rage at her former workplace. Episode 4 of The Amazing Digital Circus, Fast Food Masquerade, is the most disappointing episode of the entire show. Gangle was never an interesting, well-developed, or even necessary character, but when I heard she would be getting her own episode, I was excited because, well, Gangle had a lot of potential. Gangle's character is, quite obviously, meant to be a metaphor for masking, a coping mechanism used by neurodivergent people to hide their abnormal traits and exist among neurotypical people. So a story about a character who does that same thing would appeal heavily to the show's primarily neurodivergent audience. So it's sad to say that episode 4, Gangle's episode, is a complete dumpster fire. It's a thematically confused mess that just barely glazes the surface of the subject, and ultimately does nothing of consequence for the series. Without further ado, let's get into the wasted potential of Fast Food Masquerade. Firstly, let's go over Gangle as an allegory for masking, a behavior used by neurodivergent people to hide their visibly neurodivergent traits and appear more normal to their neurotypical peers, which Gangle shows off via her face being a literal theater mask. However, this is where we run into our first problem, not necessarily with the episode, but with Gangle's overall character. I know certain stans will try to claim this interpretation is inaccurate and call me media illiterate or just straight up harass me, but the show isn't doing itself any favors. It's not made clear whether these masks actively affect her mood or are simply representative of it. Gangle's mood shifts on a dime when her happy mask is broken, and the show seems to imply that her tragedy mask is her default state of mind, so you'd think that the show is trying to say she's depressed but puts on a smile for others. Heck, based on this interpretation, you could even say it was heavily implied she had bipolar disorder or even depression, which is part of the reason I was so excited for this episode. We could have gotten a character who was canonically neurodivergent and whose illness wasn't hidden beneath layers of subtext, yet she went from someone with heavily implied bipolar disorder that could have been expanded upon to just a quirky little girl who likes drawing her anime OCs. The show neutered her, turning her from someone with a heavily implied mental illness to someone who's just quirky and embarrassed about her interests. Gangle's behavior seems more dependent on what mask she's wearing than the actual circumstances she's in. Whenever her happy mask is shown to break, it's always the result of some external stimuli, such as when she's knocked over or literally has it ripped off. If we're meant to see Gangle's character as an allegory for masking, it would make much more sense for the mask to break or fall off when she's under severe stress, when it becomes too emotionally taxing to keep faking. If the implication is instead that the masks influence her behavior, which the show seems to suggest by stating that Zubal's mask makes her feel normal, then it ruins any potential allegory that could be made, as it suggests that Gangle has little to no control over her own emotions and is completely at the behest of whatever hunk of garbage is strapped to her face, which doesn't exactly fit how masking works in the real world.
Hey, Zubal, do you want to hold on to this during today's game?
Huh?
I don't really trust myself that much with it. And I also just really want to be able to fire a Tommy gun while laughing maniacally, and I don't want to break it before I get that chance.
I'll keep it safe for you.
Are you still following us?
Yeah, we're still following you.
Where else would we be? They're still following us!
All right, this is a long one. We're gonna have to run. Let's go!
Ha!
Oh, we got so unlucky with the drops here.
It's time.
Why'd you stop shooting? You out of ammo?
Why'd you stop? You out of ammo?
Pomni, got any ammo left?
I have one in the cylinder and one sniper round, but no sniper rifle.
Crap.
Not to mention, the show's actively hypocritical with how it treats her character and frames her behaviors. In episodes 1 through 3, she's consistently made out to be the butt of the joke, with her mask getting broken often being a punchline, and her feelings being disregarded being something that's framed as funny. This isn't even used to emphasize the flaws of the other characters. The series uncritically portrays these moments as jokes, something we're meant to laugh at. So when episode 4 rolls around and we're suddenly meant to take her pain seriously, it creates a tonal dissonance. The show itself isn't even sure what she's meant to be. Is she meant to be a messy and complex portrayal of mental illness, a quirky little otaku who just needs to learn how to be herself, or a joke character whose pain we should disregard and find funny? As an allegory for masking, Gangle is far from the best representation. Already, we're off to a poor start. At the beginning of the episode, Zooble invites Gangle into their room and offers them a MacGuffin, a plastic mask that can't break. Before we discuss why this relationship makes no sense, I have a few just general questions. Firstly, these are digital objects. They don't have to be tied to tangible materials. Second, if Kane can make plastic masks that are virtually indestructible, then why not make all of the masks like that? And finally, why does Zooble have a chunk of plastic in their toy box that just so happens to have the exact same shape, size, and function as one of Gangle's masks? You know, in any other show, this would be called out as needlessly stupid and contrived. Yet, because it's the amazing digital circus, people have somehow managed to delude themselves into believing it's genius writing. Anyway, back on topic. Why did Zooble feel the need to do this? Like, even if by some stretch of the imagination they ended up with a mask Gangle could use, why did they feel the need to give it to them? It makes no sense for their character to be this generous. And I know people try to argue that Zooble's rough personality was just an act and that they were always kind and generous, but none of their behavior in the past episodes ever suggested this. One of the first things they do on screen is strangle Jax and then tell Ragatha and Pomni to F off. The show actively uses their burning hatred of everything they lay their eyes on and chronic lack of enthusiasm as a joke. The only moment that gives them even a semblance of depth is their episode 3 therapy session. But even then, that ends up being more about Kane's character than theirs. Nowhere was this sudden change in behavior hinted at or foreshadowed, which makes this moment feel odd and unearned. Honestly, I'm convinced the only reason Goose did this was to still give Zooble a reason to be in the show, because you could cut them from the script entirely and nothing would change in their absence. This scene comes out of complete nowhere, makes no sense for the characters, and feels like a really cheap inciting incident. This is the first time in the series they ever interact, yet they act like they're already good friends who know everything about each other. There's no proper establishment or foundation for their relationship, and the show gaslights you into believing they have any chemistry. Their relationship is paper thin, with almost no depth to it. Their dynamic is as simple as Zubul being Gangle's emotional crutch and nothing more. They have no shared traits or interests that would make a friendship between the two seem believable if they were real people, and definitely not well written as fictional characters. Plus, the relationship ends up barely mattering to the overall episode. We get one small scene of Zubul checking up on Gangle, and they have a little conversation at the end. However, the relationship comes out of nowhere and ends up barely contributing anything to the episode. It legitimately feels like Goosh just forced these two together to give Zubul an excuse to remain relevant to the plot. However, this episode doesn't just fumble the characters and their relationships. Earlier I mentioned how hypocritically the show treats Gangle, framing her pain as a joke and not critically analyzing these jokes. But another consequence of this is that it results in the episode feeling confused and not knowing what message it's trying to convey. The show barely explores how masking or any similar coping mechanism can be harmful beyond the surface level. We never see how Gangle feels about the MacGuffin or how it harms her. The show only ever frames her behavior while wearing it as a joke. The one time we get to see how she does feel about it and the impact it has on her is during the cliche sitting down in the dark and trauma dumping scene. But even then, she doesn't lament about how stressful it is to keep up this lie or how unfulfilling it is to hide her true self from everyone around her in order to fit in. She complains about having no one to talk to. Hello? Did you forget about your half-baked excuse for a friend who gave you this MacGuffin in the first place? This is another reason why I'm convinced the opening scene was just a lazy excuse to keep Zubul plot relevant, because the show constantly picks and chooses when it wants to remember they exist. Back on topic. The premise doesn't set up any conflict, either internal or external, that could be used to set up a theme or have the characters learn anything. It's all just wacky hijinks caused by Gangle being a terrible person. The show never makes a point about how the mask makes Gangle do things she would never do, and that if she's going to be disliked regardless, she should at least be herself. We're just meant to laugh at how awful she is. In fact, the show itself never even frames Gangle's behavior as bad or something to be criticized, even though she spends the entire episode conceited, self-absorbed, and demanding. The only character who ever calls her out on this is a drunken Ragatha, and even then, her words are meant to be framed as mean, and even then, she is literally drunk, so anything she says will immediately be dismissed. By the end of the episode, Gangle is drained from the day of work and forcing a fake persona. So does she, I don't know, confide in her supposed friend about her feelings, ask for advice, tell her that the mask isn't working? No. Zubul just leaves her. Once again, the show loves to pick and choose when it remembers Zubul exists and that they're meant to be Gangle's friend. So if Zubul doesn't stick their neck out for her, and she's learned nothing over the course of the episode, how does the show wrap up the conflict? Well, Pomni, remember Pomni, the supposed protagonist, offers to close for Gangle so she can leave early, a sweet gesture. However, there's one problem. Pomni and Gangle have no relationship. They've only ever interacted once, and that interaction was tense and uncomfortable. Ergo, you'd probably assume this gesture wouldn't mean much for Gangle in the long run, right? Well, no. Because you see, this momentary act of kindness from a character who she has only had one minor interaction with and has no deeper feelings on was somehow enough to, I guess, cure her? Because that's really the way this moment frames it, what with her throwing away the mask and running with all these glittery bouquet lights and inspiring music. It seems like the episode is trying to say that she no longer needs the mask and has effectively fixed herself. So, what message is this episode trying to send? No, like genuinely, leave your interpretations in the comments. I would love to see what you came up with. But without resorting to headcanons or taking scenes out of their original context, what is Fast Food Masquerade actually trying to say? Because looking at what actually happens in this episode, none of it seems to be pointing towards any core theme or message the episode wants you to find. Honestly, just looking at the episode as is, any theme you could glean from it feels either toxic or unrealistic. Don't accept gifts from well-meaning people who are just trying to help. If others dislike you because of your mental illness, that's your fault. Unlearning deeply ingrained toxic coping mechanisms is easy, actually, and if you haven't figured that out yet, then skill issue. I genuinely can't think of a positive lesson that could be learned from this episode. In fact, Zubal's saying that they'll just try something else, as well as Gangle's behavior in this episode, almost makes it feel like the episode has a pro-masking message. Don't be the obnoxious real you that nobody likes. Be the soft, palatable version of you that everyone is used to.
Hey, I found this AK thing. If we can't find the Tommy gun, will this work?
Yeah. Do you think Jax is gonna be mad that I didn't team up with him?
I wouldn't worry about him right now. It's all just a game in the end.
It's Jax, though. He probably wants revenge, and he's gonna make it painful.
Hey, you deserve better than thinking about him when he's not even here. You're a human. You're not his toy.
It sometimes doesn't feel that way.
These avatar gimmicks, huh? Makes you wonder why no one else got them.
I just wish that... How are you supposed to like the part of yourself that just makes you worse than everyone else?
'Cause it exists. It's a part of you that's real. And the only you that you should care about is the real you. You have to choose to love yourself, even if it doesn't make sense. It's not natural, it's intentional.
Have you ever had to make that choice?
Huh?
Sorry, I mean, of course not. You're Zubal.
Whatever happens, I've got your back if you've got mine.
Yeah. Now let's go kill Pomni and Jax.
Before episode 5 released, I made an offhand statement joking that Gangle's character development in future episodes would consist of a single token scene of her standing up for herself, as this show has a chronic habit of treating one-off moments like they're meant to be indicative of serious change. However, that was a major overestimation of what Gangle would actually receive. Gangle is still shown, plain as day, to be wearing her happy mask. If you've ever wanted to invalidate a character's entire arc, this is how you do it. During the entirety of episode 5, Gangle is characterized exactly how she was during the past 4, an insecure, whiny doormat who's fundamentally incapable of standing up for herself. Sure, she's a bit more brazen about her interests, and the show actually remembered she interacted with Zooble, but other than that, she's fundamentally the exact same character. It might as well be like episode 4 never even happened. And the show has given me no reason to believe future episodes won't just be more of the same. To say the handling of Gangle's character in episode 5 was flawed would be an understatement. It's fundamentally bad writing that completely invalidates the purpose of the prior episode, and that's not even getting into all the other problems episode 5 has. Anyway, let's wrap this up. Episode 4 is bad, which is upsetting because, by all accounts, it should have been the best episode of the whole series. The Amazing Digital Circus has a large portion of neurodivergent people in its fan base, so seeing a character who reflects their struggles and that they could relate to would only reinforce their love for the show. It could have been a soberingly realistic depiction of someone's struggles with mental illness and how that influences their day-to-day life. Yet, the Amazing Digital Circus doesn't know how to handle complex, dark, or mature themes. At times, it seems almost afraid of the subject matter it chooses to tackle. Consequently, we ended up with an episode that was shallow, confused, and ultimately had a lot of wasted potential. Anyway, that's all from me. Thanks for watching, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all next time.